when I talk about living a freedom lifestyle, it's not just about the money, but money is important, but it's not the only thing, right? We also want to have the time, the energy, and the relationships, because if you don't, then what good is the money? So it's really all of those things that encompass what we like to call a freedom lifestyle.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dr. Noah St. John, who will share how to get rid of your head trash. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Sadhguru. The walls of self-protection you build around yourself becomes walls of self-imprisonment over time. Listen in on how that happened with our guest. It's going to be our theme of clearing out those voices that imprison us. Let's get rid of them, which is exactly what last week's action step was, to rewire your brain, to get rid of the old programs and create new ones that support who you want to be. I know I constantly work on this never-ending journey to go higher and higher and break down the walls a little bit at a time. As you listen, I want you to think about starting ugly, wherever you are, and realizing that from here, there's no place but up. And then start working towards that. Our guest is going to share that same message and help you with it as well. Dr. Noah St. John is known worldwide as the father of Affirmations and the mental health coach to the stars. He's famous for helping his clients make more in just 12 weeks than they've made in the past 12 months. His clients have added more than $2.7 billion using his methods since 1997. Let's meet our guest and find out how to do that. Welcome to Richer Soul, Dr. Noah St. John. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, thank you very much, Rocky. It's great to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. Let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Oh, boy. Did you open a can of worms with that question, Rocky? Oh, my God. All right. So here's the story. I'm going to give you the shorter version rather than the War and Peace version. But I grew up poor in a rich neighborhood. Okay. And I know that's a total cliche, but it's totally true. I grew up in this little town called Kennebunkport, Maine, which just happens to be one of the wealthiest communities in New England. But my family was dirt poor. I mean that literally, because we lived at the bottom of a dirt road in a drafty, unfinished house that my parents ended up losing to foreclosure. So from a very young age, I was painfully exposed to the gap, the chasm between the haves and the have-nots. Now, the haves was everyone else in the community. The have-nots was my family. Now, you hear these speakers, I'm sure, Rocky, you've heard, and everybody listening to the program has heard speakers that get on stage, right? Motivational speakers. And they say, well, we were poor, but we were happy. We didn't know we were poor. Well, in my family, we freaking knew we were poor. Okay. So, because my mother, bless her heart, reminded us every day that we were poor and miserable. So no, it wasn't happy. It sucked, So I hated that life of poverty and fear and lack, not enoughness. That's what I grew up with in my family. But I saw that right down the street, there's great wealth and abundance. So I said, how the heck do I get from here to there? Because I hated being poor. And so, people call me the father of Afformations. I'm known as the mental health coach to the stars. I'm also known as the nerdiest nerd in the personal growth industry, meaning I'm like the Sheldon Cooper of self-help. I'm just the nerdiest nerd. I love reading books. Well, as you can see in my background here, I love writing books now too, but I always love reading books. So, as the nerd, I just went to the library and started reading every book that I could on self-help, on personal growth, right? Self-development. All the classics, Dale Carnegie, Napoleon Hill, Stephen Covey, Wayne Dyer, I've just read all the classics, and I really, really tried to make them work. I really, worked hard. I studied, I focused. The problem was I just could never get them to work. I just couldn't do it. As hard as I was working, as much as I was studying and reading all those books, and, listening to the gurus, I just couldn't get it to work. So, what happened was, at the age of 25, I actually decided to commit suicide because I was so depressed, so frustrated, and broke, and nothing had ever really worked for me. And, I share that story in my books and my programs. But anyway, at the very last moment, my life was spared. And so I was still here on the earth, but I didn't know why I was here on the earth. I didn't know, why am I here? So I decided to go on another long journey to find my purpose. Why am I here? And I did what we nerds do. I went back to the library, started reading more books, this time on more spiritual development. The first journey that I had at that first, portion of my life was more about the outer success, which I didn't really get. And then I went on more of an inner journey to determine or see if I could find, why am I here? What's my purpose? So I was reading books by authors like Ernest Holmes, Marianne Williamson, Louise Hay, Neil Donald Walsh, Deepak Chopra, those types of spiritual thinkers. Well, again, long story short, compressing the story. In 1997, I had two epiphanies that changed my life when I realized exactly, number one, what was missing in the personal development industry. And number two, that's what gave me my purpose here on the earth. And so for the last 25 years now, 25 plus years, that's what I've been teaching people. That's what I've been coaching and writing books and doing seminars, speaking all around the world on these topics. And, we've helped our clients over the last, 2 decades to really add over $2.7 billion. That's with a B, meaning we've helped people add 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures to their business. Using my methods, just these few little distinctions that I was able to identify and quantify. So really, that's how it all started.
We'll get to the epiphanies. Before we do, so let me ask you, were you hanging out with George Bush and the family there or no?
I went by his house every day on the way to school and every day on the way home from school. So yeah, I went right by him. And I used to tell a joke that said, he still owes me money from that poker game, but my wife said, don't tell that. She didn't like that joke, so I don't tell that joke anymore. Anyway, no, I mean, it's funny. A very, very quick story. I was walking with my mother into Walmart one day. It was in Kennebunk there, right near Kennebunk Port, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this enormous vehicle like barreling towards us. And it's like stopped like 5 feet from us. And I'm like, what the heck was that? Well, out of the vehicle is this huge Ford Expedition, walks George Bush and like 4 Secret Service men running after him, going into Walmart. I'm going, holy crap. My mother and I were almost just hit by the president of the United States. I mean, what a great story. That'd be, of course, I'd be dead, but I was like, wow, thanks a lot. I mean, that was unreal. And that really happened. Anyway, that's my George Bush story.
So how did you deal with the poverty as a kid? I mean, your mother was making it clear that things weren't great. And right. Did it mess you up or did you flow
big
with
time.
it?
Well, why do you think I tried to commit suicide? I mean, it was not exactly fun. So yeah, it definitely messed me up. In fact, it led to one of my epiphanies, discoveries, all these years later, when I realized, what I call, okay, let me back up a little bit. A lot of people come to me, they hire me as a coach, as a speaker, whatever, and they say, hey, no, I've got all these problems. I'm putting out all these, putting all this content, nobody's seeing it. I'm creating lead magnets, nobody wants it. On the revenue roller coaster, 1 month it's up and 1 month it's down. I'm not attracting the right clients. I'm wasting time speaking to people who will never hire me, and they're just telling me all these problems. And I say, I hear you, and I've heard this a lot. I hear this from everybody, but you don't have all those problems. You actually have one problem. And they go, well, what do you mean? I say, well, the fact is, yes, you have all these problems, but actually those are just symptoms. And so what you actually have is one problem, which is what I identify, which I call head trash. Now, head trash is the voice in your head that says, I can't do it because ... And then you just fill in the blank, right? I can't do it because, and then people, of course, have all their reasons why they can't do that thing, right? And so what I realized over time, and one of the reasons we help our clients make so much money is because, people think they have all these different problems, but those are just symptoms. So it's kind of like having a toothache, right? If you have a toothache, it's pain, right? It hurts. It's like, my tooth hurts. Well, that's a problem. But the fact is that's just a symptom, right? So, what some people would do is say, well, just, take a pain pill, take a Tylenol, take an aspirin, and just try to dull the pain. Well, obviously, what are you doing? You're not fixing the problem, right? So, you got to go to the dentist and then says, oh, gee, well, you got a cavity or, and then you need this procedure, you need some help, right? So that's like what I do. I mean, I'm kind of like the dentist in that analogy. And I say, we've got a problem here, but it's causing these pains that you're feeling. See, that's the issue about symptoms. Symptoms equals pain, right? And what do we humans want? We want to avoid pain, right? So most people are, entrepreneurs, business owners, but, everybody, we're just running around trying to solve all these problems, but they're really just symptoms. So what's nice is when you only have one actual problem that you have to fix, it really ends up fixing everything else. In fact, one of my clients said years ago, when we were doing a coaching work together, he said, Noah, do you realize that your coaching is the only coaching that fixes every other coaching? And I go, I guess you're right. That's true. It does. So I like that it came from a client. It wasn't me saying it. It was, him saying it. But that's really, so going back to your question of, did it mess me up? Absolutely. So I ended up with tons of head trash, right? I mean, nobody decides to commit suicide who doesn't have a lot of head trash. You see what I mean? So even, using myself as an example, going back, 30 years when I had that experience, I thought I had all these problems. The number one being I never have any money. I'm broke all the time. I don't have money. But that really wasn't the problem. Yes, it was a symptom. And yes, it hurt. It was painful. But that really wasn't the problem. And no one ever told me. See, I had to figure it out for myself. I had to figure, after 30 plus years of study and pain and torture and torment. So, that's one of the things I like to say to people is you don't have to go through what I had to go through. All those arrows in my back, that I had to get. You don't have to do that. That's why I write these books and do these courses so that you don't have to go through, the pain and torture that I did. And, I think now that's my purpose here on the earth is to help people and make sure that they don't have to go through that pain and suffering.
We'll get back to head trash in 1 second. Before we do, when did you start reading all these self-help books and what kind of turned you in that direction?
Well, you won't believe me when I tell you, but I started reading these books when I was 7 years old. Now, I told that story in my very first book, which was published in 1999 called Permission to Succeed. It was published by the Chicken Soup for the Soul publisher. And I put that story in, and my editor at the time said, well, you can't put that story in because no one's going to believe you. I said, but it's the true story. Ask my mother. And she said, well, we don't care. Take it out. And I was like, okay. Anyway, so I don't care whether people believe it or not. I started reading. And it was funny because my dad was really into self-help. He had Success Magazine. If everybody remembers Success Magazine, and now I've been in Success Magazine, which is amazing, talk about coming full circle. But I mean, my dad always had Success Magazine lying around and Dale Carnegie and all these books and, on his bookshelf. So literally I was reading before I was 2 years old. I told you I was like Sheldon Cooper. Sorry. But anyway, I was reading and I literally was just browsing my dad's bookshelf, and I saw this title, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I said, wow, that sounds really interesting. I mean, I'd like to win friends and influence people. Now, I didn't, I just didn't think anything of it. And I just started reading it. And that was my introduction to self-help, believe it or not. So like I said, I mean, at the age of 7, I literally started reading all these books. And, they basically all say the same thing, really. And that's one of the reasons why, what I do is different, in this industry, the personal development industry. It is different because having consumed all of those books for so many years, I was able to come up with these different distinctions that they just don't talk about, that I do fill in the blanks that they left out. And that's one of the reasons we've helped people make lots and lots of money. But it's not just about the money. It's also about, I call it winning your life back, because what good is money if you don't have any time or energy or relationships to enjoy it, So that's one of the things that also is different. When I talk about living a freedom lifestyle, it's not just about the money, but money is important, but it's not the only thing, right? We also want to have the time, the energy, and the relationships, because if you don't, then what good is the money? So it's really all of those things that encompass what we like to call a freedom lifestyle.
And very much the same tenets that we share here at Richer Soul. And I'm guessing the books didn't help your dad either.
Well, my dad's a hard-headed guy, and he doesn't change.
Okay.
And we've talked about this. I'm not speaking out of school. I'm not throwing him under the bus. He's just a really hard-headed guy, and in defense of him, kudos to him for even having those books. And it's clear that some part of him wanted to, but I think a bigger part of him was afraid to make those changes. I had to, let's face it, facing my own mortality, going to take my own life, it kind of is a wake up call, or at least it better be, you hope that it is. And so I don't know that he ever had one of those experiences. So he, he's ironically, he's just very happy, and he doesn't care about money. He literally doesn't care about money. I remember, here's a quick example. When I was a kid, he would drive us to high school, drop us off at high school, right? My brother and I. And so one day, driving on he was going to work, dropping us off at school. I said, Dad, do you make the same amount of money no matter how many hours you work? And he said, well, yeah, I'm on the salary. So I said to him, then why do you work all the time? Because he would just work so many hours. And in my head, I'm going, well, if you make this much money for this much hours, why don't you work fewer hours? No matter if you work less or more hours, you get paid the same. Why don't you work fewer hours? To me, that's a logical question, right? Duh, why wouldn't you work fewer? But he just loves and, loved at the time, what he was doing at the time. He just loved it. And that was his fuel, I guess. And so for me, that didn't compute. I was like, no, if I'm working, I want to get paid. And if I'm getting paid, I don't want to work, why put in more hours when you could put in fewer hours? That didn't make any sense to me.
Because he loved what he did, right?
He loved what he did.
And that's cool.
And he didn't care about the money. He just didn't and doesn't.
And that's fine. So let's kind of take the step forward. Can you define what head trash is, and then tell us how to fix it?
Absolutely. All right. So as I was saying, and I'll just reiterate for people maybe just joining us, or the point is that, and I'll just say what I say to my clients, you don't have 10 problems, you don't have 20 problems, you have one problem. and this one problem has lots of heads, lots of symptoms, right? Like I was using those examples before. So the one problem really is head trash. Now, that might not make sense to some people, but if you think about what head trash is, the way I teach it, I've been teaching it for the last 20 plus years, head trash is the voice in your head that says, I can't do it because. Okay, so let's back up. Let's think about your goals. For everybody listening to this program, all right, what are your goals, right? People say, well, no, I want to start my business. I want to grow my business. I want to, scale my business. I want to take more time off, take more vacations, maybe retire my spouse, get a new car, new house, just have more fun, have more life, right? All of those things, right? So think about your goal. I call that your pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, right? So just picture your pot of gold, whatever it might be. Okay, now that's where you want to be. Now, but here's where you are, right? So you are here and you want to be there. All right, so I call it going from your CPR to your NDR. What does that mean? It means your current perceived reality, that's where you think you are, to your new desired reality. That's where you want to be, your pot of gold. Now, between your CPR and your NDR, there's a gap, right? Otherwise, you'd already be at your pot of gold, right? So what is that gap? That gap basically boils down to a belief gap, which means I don't really think I can do it. I mean, and then you have the head trust that gives you all the reasons why you can't do it. Well, no, I really want to do this, but I'm too old. I really want to have that, but I've made too many mistakes. I really want to do this, but I can't afford it. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the right connections. I don't have a big enough following. My wife won't let me do it. My spouse won't let me do it. My kids, I'm always, I don't have time because I have these kids, or I'm divorced, or I'm a Martian, whatever it might be. I've heard every excuse there is, right? And that's the point. That's what they are. They're excuses. But to the person, to us individuals, we really believe that. And I mean, what's so funny about our head trash, and people are going to laugh at this, but we will actually defend that head trash to the death. We will defend our limitations to the death. Why? Because if we don't defend our limitations, then we might have to change. Now, what's so ironic about humans is that the one thing that we want is change. Why? I mean, I just told you, well, I want more money. I want more time. I want more energy. I want better relationships. All those things represent change. But guess what's the one thing that we fear? Change. Exactly. The one thing that we fear is the one thing that we want. And so that's why we hold onto our head trash for dear life. Of course, nobody does this on purpose, right? Nobody's doing this consciously. So that's a big part of my job, my work, my coaching, my books, my seminars, my coaching. That's just bringing it to the conscious awareness of the individual. And they go, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that I was doing this. I didn't know. And, it's funny. One of my clients said to me also, a different client said years ago, he said, Noah, as we're doing this work, we're excavating this head trash, taking out our head trash. He said, it's like you turned a light on in a room that has been dark my whole life. And as I thought about that, I said, that's actually exactly what it is. Because think about it. For everybody listening to this program, think about, if you're in your home right now, picture that you're in your home and somebody comes in, turns off all the lights in the room that you're in and you can't see anything. It's totally dark. And then they say to you, all right, now I want you to rearrange the furniture. And you're like, well, I can't see. And they go, well, set your goals. Come on, think positive. Come on, you can do it, right? You see what they're doing? They're doing all this motivational crap, right? Now that's not exactly wrong, but it's like, I can't see, right? And so they go, come on, you can do it. And then you're like, boom, and you bump your shin and ow, oh, you stub your toe. I can't. And so what I do is I come in and I go, click. And you go, oh, there it is. Well, now I can rearrange the furniture, right? Because I can see what I'm doing. So that's literally what this work is like. It's really very powerful. In fact, very life-changing.
And it is. And, I think for a lot of people, just admitting that they have voices in their head and head trash, it's normal. Everybody has it.
Yes.
We don't talk about it, right? We don't admit it, but it's just the reality of the situation. And when we start to have these conversations, we essentially turn the lights on.
That's right. Exactly.
So you said you had an epiphany back in 97 of what was missing. Was that the head trash or is that something else?
Well, it actually is exactly related to what we're talking about. So it's definitely related to head trash. But one of the distinctions that I made was that there are a small, tiny minority of people that are what I call the naturals of success. So the naturals of success are basically the gurus that, that are out there that we've heard a lot from. And ironically, they don't have head trash. They actually do believe in themselves, like to the thousandth, millionth degree.
Do they? Because I've heard Tony Robbins speak. I consider him to be, but yet Tony says I have head trash. I just ignore it. He's like, you'll never get rid of the head trash, but I tell it to go be quiet.
That's right. But there's also what I call the naturals of success, who are what I call unconsciously competent at allowing themselves to succeed.
Okay.
Now, that's a mouthful, but let me unpack it for you. It's very simple. So whenever we humans want to master a habit or skill, right, we go through 4 phases of competence. We have the first phase is unconscious incompetence. That means you don't know, you don't know. The second phase is conscious incompetence. That means you know, you don't know. The third phase is conscious competence, which is you know, you know. And then the final phase is unconscious competence, which is you do without thinking. All right. So what I realized is that the naturals of success have developed a habit of becoming unconsciously competent at allowing themselves to succeed. So like you're talking about that example, the person, even if they do have head trash, which is certainly possible, they develop this habit that says, who cares? Whereas the rest of us, the 99%, we are being bullied by that head trash. And frankly, in many cases, millions of cases, driven by it. You know, we're succumbing to that head trash, right? We're being, as I call it, the bully in our head, right? The bully in our head is the one that's actually in charge of our lives, which is what is causing, of course, all these other problems that I talked about. And so the point is, what I discovered, one of my epiphanies was that there is a condition that didn't have a name before I identified it, discovered it. And the condition is called success anorexia. Now, some people say, well, that sounds weird. But the truth is that if you look at it, just like people are starving, millions of people are starving themselves of food, millions of people are also unknowingly starving themselves of success. And so I became the first person to actually identify that, name the condition, and then, of course, create all these books and courses and coaching around that topic. So success anorexia then evolved into this idea, this concept of head trash. And that is, so success anorexia is a condition that causes all these other problems, just like head trash is the problem that causes all the other problems. So those two things together really were the essence of my discovery 25 years ago. And that's when I realized that all those gurus are telling us things like, think positive, set your goals, you can do it. None of those things are wrong. But if you're in a totally dark room, they don't exactly help. Right? And another analogy that I like to use is, if they tell you to drive a nail into a wall and they give you a chainsaw, how successful are you going to be in that endeavor? Not very, right? Because why? They gave you the wrong tool, right? There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with the tool they gave us. They gave us a tool to motivate us, get motivated. Okay, is motivation wrong? Of course not. But is this a problem of motivation? Not at all. This is not a problem of motivation. Most people, I'll give you an example. When people find something that works, they get motivated. When they have tried and tried and tried and tried for years and years and years, spent all this money, all this time, all this effort, and it's not working, what do you think happens? Is the person motivated? No, they're very demotivated. That was my example. Why do you think I decided to commit suicide at 25? I've been trying for years with nothing to show for it. So that's about as demotivated as you can get. All right. So all the motivational, talks in the world were not going to help me, and frankly, won't help a lot of the people in a similar situation. So that's one of the distinctions that I made that frankly changed my life and has changed a lot of people's lives who've worked with me and studied with me and coached with me over the years.
I had that same struggle with Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm like, okay, yes. I get all of this.
Yes.
But how do I make it work for me?
Yes.
I see it. It makes sense. But I couldn't figure out how to make it work for me. Now
that's because he didn't tell you.
Well,
and I mean, Robert says this, okay? That is one of the worst written books ever, okay?
And I'm not he didn't write it.
Because Robert says it himself. He's not a best writing author. He's a best-selling author.
He didn't write it. He even says it.
What's that?
He didn't write it.
Well, no kidding. Exactly. I mean, it is not well written. And frankly, that's the problem I also have with Think and Grow Rich. Think and Grow Rich, the greatest book in the world. I'm like, he didn't say anything. He didn't say one single thing. If you read that book, he doesn't say anything. And I've read this book, however many times. And I remember when I was in my 20s, I think, teens, 20s, whatever, when I read it the first time. And I was so excited. I'm like, oh boy, this is it. This is the big, the book. And I read, I'm like, there's nothing here. I mean, literally, he didn't say one single thing. And I'm going, wow, that was a disappointment. And so, but there's millions of people that just, oh, it's the greatest book. I'm going, there's nothing here, So that was one of the examples that I said, I'm like, wow, these guys really don't tell you anything, that's what I'm talking about, going back to the motivation, demotivation point. When something works, you get motivated. You're like, yeah, I can do this. And obviously that book and others like it, have worked for lots and lots of people. And they're like, oh, I totally get it. I'm like, for me, I'm like, huh? There's nothing here. So everybody's different, I guess.
The same person is behind the marketing of both of those.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. So it is.
Yeah. Marketing is, what I often say to my clients, I say, marketing isn't everything, but it's the only thing.
And it's true. Usually the best people are not the ones who get the business. It's usually the ones who have the best marketing. And that is unfortunate.
Yes.
That we as humans
yes.
don't actually spend the time to dig into what's real and what's not and do that. But that's
the gurus have done a great job of seducing us. That's their job. They seduce us. And I mean, I got seduced to the tune of $500,000. I bought all their stuff. Literally, I bought it and bought it, a Lambo and a helicopter and this and that. And they know exactly what buttons to push, and they're pushing those buttons. But the best marketers does not mean that they're the best teachers. In fact, usually the best marketers can't teach their way out of a paper bag. That's what I found after giving these clowns $500,000. I'm like, okay. So like you just said, I hope people do their research, and find, like when you go to our website, you'll see, literally well over hundreds of testimonials, case studies. That's what I want people to see. It's not about me, it's about the fact that it works, that there's a system. Because, when it's about a guru or an individual, then maybe it's just that person's personality. Well, guess what? What if I don't have that personality? Then, well, I guess you're out of luck. No, you need a system, a formula, a methodology that is like, that's fill in the blanks, paint by numbers. And, that's what I've been able to do. And because I wanted it, nobody gave it to me, even after spending all that money.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. So we started off, you talked about being the father of Afformations,
yes,
which is different than Affirmations.
Yep.
So can you share what's the difference between the two?
Yes, absolutely. And what I want people to realize is that we are using a new word for most people listening to the program. It's a word that I invented, being the father of Affirmations. So I'll spell it. It's Afformations. Afformations. And you can go to Afformations.com and learn more about it. All right. So everybody listening to this program knows what an affirmation is, right? So like as a coach, an executive coach, as a keynote speaker, one of the things I am privileged to do is I do workshops and keynote speeches for, companies, organizations all around the world, from, private workshops of 100 people up to, multi-global, multinational, multi-global would be good, multinational, events, with tens of thousands of people. So one of the things I like to do at my events, when I'm speaking, is have everyone stand up and I say, all right, everybody, we're going to do an affirmation just like the gurus taught us. All right. So we're going to do a traditional affirmation and everybody say, I am rich. All right. And everybody goes, I am rich. And you know what happens next? Everybody starts laughing. And I go, what are you laughing at? And they go, well, I'm not rich. And then I say, well, but you just said you were. And they go, yeah, but I don't believe it. Now, see, isn't that the problem, right? That's the problem with that old method, the Affirmations method that the gurus have been teaching for decades. And notice that's the only method we were ever given. We were only literally given one method, that one thing, right? Use these empowering or these positive statements, right? I'm happy, I'm rich, I'm successful, whatever. And in fact, ironically, most people don't know this, but there was a study done that found that 75% of people who use the old Affirmations method actually end up more frustrated than before they were using them. So literally, the old way only works for about 25% of the people. So imagine if you had a smartphone that only worked 25% of the time. What would you do with that phone? Would you keep using it, or would you probably trade it in, right, for one that worked a little bit better? Right. So that's what I invented. I invented a better smartphone, a better method. So the Affirmations method is a statement, right? So I did this, right? Every self-help book says the same thing, right? I mentioned earlier that, I read all these books. They all said the same thing. Use these affirmations, put them positive, write them down, write them back. We've heard this a million times, right? So I had these Post-it notes all over my room, I'm happy, I'm rich, I'm successful. When the reality was, no, I'm not. I'm broke, unhappy, and miserable, right? So it's like, what aren't they telling us? What are we missing here? What are they leaving out? And so I was so bothered by this, so frustrated for years. So I was in the shower one morning. This was April 1997. In my books and my programs, I call it the shower that changed everything, right? Because isn't it true that we often have those aha moments in the shower? Probably everybody's had those, right? Everybody listening to the program has had an aha moment in the shower. Well, this particular shower, I was thinking about this. And I said, how come we've been doing the same thing for years and years and years? The gurus say all the same thing. Every book says the same thing. Use these positive statements and, it's supposed to change your life. And it doesn't work. And so I was like, what are they leaving out? And so I started to think about, well, what are we really talking about here? What we're really talking about is beliefs, because if you want to change your life, you have to change your beliefs. Now, I knew that part was right. So I said, okay, then what is a belief? Well, a belief is just a thought. Well, then what is thought? And the more that I thought about that question, what is human thought? A process of asking and searching for answers to questions, not statements, but questions. In fact, I can prove it to you right now. And Rocky, we could play this game. This is another game I like to play at my seminars and keynote speeches, but we could play along here. All right, so I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to see what happens. Why is the sky blue? Why is the sky blue? Now, what just happened in your brain right then, in that moment?
I started to think.
Right. That's right. You literally started to search for the answer, didn't you?
I did.
I asked the question, literally a random question. Why is the sky blue? Now, your brain instantly goes into search mode. In fact, have you ever on your computer, tried to find a file, like you do a file search, right? Or maybe a Google search, right? That's exactly what you're doing. You're actually searching for answer to a question, right? Where's this file? Show me this search on Google or whatever it might be. Well, guess what? Your brain's like a computer. Your brain's like Google. It's a search engine. That's actually what your brain is. I mean, part of your brain anyway, right? Your brain is literally the most powerful search engine computer that's ever been invented. All right. And so the point is your brain is literally searching for the answer. And notice you can't not do it. You can't not do it. Psychologists call this the embedded presupposition factor of the brain. All that means is when you ask a question, your brain automatically searches for the answer. And so I said, now, wait a minute. If the human mind is automatically searching for answers to questions, why are we going around making statements we don't believe? Why don't we just cut out the middleman? And I said, well, what would that look like? Well, let's see. You got the statement or affirmation, I am rich, which your brain says, yeah, right. Right? In my books, my programs, I actually call it the yeah, right response, because your brain goes, yeah, right. Right? And so then, okay, so I said, if that's the statement, then what would the question be? And then I said, why am I so rich? Why am I so rich? Now, when you ask that question, why am I so rich? What immediately starts to happen in your brain?
You start defining why.
That's right. You start to search for the answer. So what we're talking about here, what I teach in my books, my courses, my coaching, is the law of sowing and reaping. As you sow, so shall you reap. Now, this is nothing new. It's been taught for centuries. Yet, what are most people doing? Right? That we're sowing seeds of thought. And yet, what are most people doing? Sowing lousy thought seeds. Why am I so stupid? Why am I so fat? Why can't I lose weight? Why isn't my business growing? Why can't I get more patients or customers or clients? Why don't I get more attention on social media? Why is there more month left at the end of the money? When you ask lousy questions, what do you get?
Lousy answers.
Lousy answers, right. And that creates a lousy life. So I said, wait a second, what if instead of asking lousy questions, only the lousy answers create a lousy life? What if we just flip the whole thing on its head? Start asking empowering questions that lead to phenomenal answers and create a wonderful life. And as I was standing there in the shower, April 1997, I said, holy cow, I think I just invented something. And so I had to give it a name. And the name that I gave it was Afformations. This is one of my books on Afformations, right? It's called Millionaire Afformations, the magic formula that will make you rich. But it's AFF. Again, I'll just spell it out. AFFORMATIONS, Afformations. And when I discovered that, I literally did two things, or said two things to myself. I said, holy cow, that is so cool. And then I said, I can't believe no one's ever thought of that before. And then the third thing I said is, I better give it a name, so the name, because I thought of it. And then I said, oh my gosh, I got to name this. I got to name this method something. I can't just call it, asking questions. And so that's how I came up with the word Afformations. People ask me all the time, how'd you come up with that word? So the word, remember, I'm a nerd, right? So I love Latin. Latin is my favorite, subject in high school. We nerds just love Latin. So the word affirmation, right? The old method that we've been taught for decades from the gurus, right? The old way. That word affirmation comes from the Latin word firmare, which means to make firm. Now, the word Afformations that I invented, and by the way, it's perfectly legitimate to invent a new word, right? I mean, when you have a new way of looking at the universe or new technology, isn't it true? We often need a new word like Google, Facebook, YouTube, internet, software, computer. I mean, these are all very, very new words in terms of human history. They've only been around a very, very short time. Of course, now we use them every day. But, it's really a new word to describe a new technology. So what I invented was a new technology of the mind. Right. So the word Afformations comes from the Latin word formare, which means to form or give shape to. So one of the questions I often ask my coaching clients and my audience members is, what if you're making something firm, but it's in the wrong form? That means you formed the life you didn't even want. Why am I so stupid? Why can't I do anything right? Why is my business growing? Why don't I have more money? You formed it. Not on purpose, right? Nobody does this on purpose, but it doesn't matter because of the law of sowing and reaping. As you sow, so shall you reap. You're sowing those thought seeds. Well, now using my Afformations method, you can change the questions you're asking, change your questions, change your habits, change your results, and thereby change your life.
It's amazing how all that reprogramming takes place.
Yes.
But we have to understand that that's how it works, and that's what we need to do, and to make those choices.
Correct.
So when I was looking through all your work and listening, one of the things I saw that jumped out at me was there are 3 big money mistakes that even smart people make. And I thought that is a perfect thing to talk about because it happens more often than we think. Mm-hmm. So what are they?
Yes. Well, that's actually the subtitle of another one of my books called Get Rid of Your Head Trash About Money, which actually your listeners can get for free. We can give that website. So yes, talking about head trash, right? These 3 big money mistakes. So that is really holding millions of people back without their knowledge. Again, I'll just reiterate, nobody does this on purpose, right? It's not like we want to have head trash. It's not like we want to keep holding ourselves back. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, wow, this looks like a beautiful day. You know what? I think I'm going to hold myself back from success today. Right? I mean, that would be insane, right? Nobody would ever do that. But that's a conscious thought, see? And so all of this head trash, really, certainly the majority of it is in the subconscious mind. It's like the iceberg principle of the brain, right? About 5%, the vast, minority is in the conscious awareness, whereas the vast majority, the 95%, is in the subconscious, meaning, the bottom part of the iceberg. And, as I always say to my clients, it wasn't the part of the iceberg that they could see that sunk the Titanic. It's the part they didn't see that sunk the Titanic. And that's what's sinking us too, right? So the first mistake is not getting rid of your head trash about money, not even being aware of your head trash, right? So not being even aware that it's there. So that's why, I'm so passionate about, doing interviews like this and sharing this information, because if I would have had this information, 30, 40, whatever years ago, I'd be a trillionaire by now, because, all those years that I spent holding myself back, I could have not done that. That would have been nice. So that's the first big mistake. Just, not even understanding or being aware of, and of course, not taking out your head trash. The second thing, or the second big money mistake is trying to do all this alone, trying to figure it out all by yourself. One of the things that we say on our campus, at successclinic.com, it's my company, is that information alone does not create change, and how do we know that? Well, I'll give you an example. Let's say you want to, lose some weight and, have six-pack abs, right? So all you do is you go to Google and type in how to have six-pack abs. And there's 10 million, billion, gajillion, videos out there, right? It's all free. Here's how to, do sit-ups or do pull-ups or whatever, right? Have six-pack abs, right? Also, if you want to say how to make money, right? Just go to Google, how to make money, how to make $1 million online, whatever, 1 million, billion, gajillion videos, right? So the point is, if that's true, if all this information is just sitting there free for the world, why isn't everybody rich, happy, and thin? Right? Because it's all just sitting there. Well, the answer is because information alone is not enough, right? If it was, we'd all be rich, happy, and thin. It's obvious that we're not, And so the point is that you need these other things. You need, the right plan. You need the right tools. You need the right support. You need people believing in you, or at least somebody believing in you. And mostly, a big part of my job, as a coach, mentor, is believing in people when they don't even believe in themselves. So trying to do it alone is a really, really bad way to do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just going to say it's going to take you a lot longer than it should. And then the third big money mistake that people make is drowning in information without taking action. So like I was just talking about, information doesn't create change, or information alone does not. Information certainly can be a stepping stone. That's true. Absolutely. Like, hopefully I'm sharing some information right now that maybe you didn't know. And like, oh, I never thought of it that way. And of course, that's what I do. But think about this. Imagine, I like to give this analogy. Imagine you're walking on the beach. It's a beautiful day and you're with that special someone, that really special person. And, you feel all the sand beneath your toes and the wind in your hair, the sun on your face. It's just a beautiful day. And all of a sudden you hear something in the distance. You turn to that person and say, did you hear that? And all of a sudden you hear, and you look out in the distance in the ocean, right out there, you're standing on the beach, you see, and you hear, help, help, help. And somebody's drowning, right? Somebody's literally drowning. Oh my gosh, they're right there. They're drowning. Now, what would you do in that moment? What would you do? Of course, we'd all, we'd jump into the water. We try to help them. We'd, get a lifeguard or something, right? We would certainly rush to their aid, wouldn't we? Everybody would do that, right? So if you saw someone drowning, would you pour a bucket of water on their head?
No.
Probably not. Not unless you're a sociopath, psychopath. No, something's not really right with you, right? So nobody would do that, right? You'd have to be insane. But yet, isn't this ironic? Do you realize that most people, millions of people, most people I talked to in the last 20 years, most people are drowning in information, literally drowning in information. And yet they keep pouring more information on their own head. So they're literally doing this to themselves. They're drowning in information and pouring more buckets of water / information on their head. So it's not that information is wrong, but the point is that we don't live in the information age. We live in the information overload age. We passed the information age 20 miles back, and we're just, everybody's on overload. And so it's not about getting more information. There's no lack of information. What there is a lack of implementation, and that leads to a lack of transformation. So the fact is that people don't want information anymore. In other words, we're drowning in information, right? It's like too much, right? We're all on overload. What we want is real transformation. And yet the transformation can only come from implementation. So that's what we focus on. Frankly, that's why our clients are so successful. That's why we've helped so many people add 6, 7, and 8 figures, because we don't just talk about information. That's just sitting there. That's not going to get it for you. That's not going to get it done. It's all about the implementation. That's what leads to the transformation. But what's so funny is, if you don't take out your head trash, guess what? You're going to keep drowning. And that's what we like to get people out of as fast as possible.
We call that analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
We spend all our time trying to analyze this situation to find the answer, and then nothing happens, and then we give up and we go on, and then it sticks in the back. See, you failed at that. You couldn't do that. I told you so.
More head trash.
More head trash.
And it's back. A downward spiral forever.
It's a wonderful viral loop. And that's why we start with the first question we do is understanding everyone's money story, because that helps you to understand your programming in what's there and to actually question it and say, hey, is my 7-year-old self serving me today or not? And I think for most people, the answer is it's not. But if you don't change the programming, then you're stuck in that loop and things don't get done. One of the things that I've seen you talk about is starting ugly. And again, that comes back, it's like analysis paralysis. Oh, I can't start until it's perfect. So let's dig into that. Why do you say start ugly?
Well, okay, that's such a great question, because this proves my point. All right, this proves exactly what I was saying. You don't have 20 problems, 10 problems, you have one problem, head trash. Head trash is going to tell you have to be perfect. If I don't do it perfectly, I better not do it. Hello? Who are you? I mean, who are you to be perfect the first time out? I mean, are you crazy? And I say that on purpose, to kind of, jar people out of their, out of their head trash, or jar their head trash out of them, I guess. The point is that so many people have that perfectionism. I used to have that. Absolutely. I mean, I was not only a straight A student, I skipped 8th grade, because I was so advanced, and I still graduated second in my class, even being a year younger than everybody in my high school. I had full scholarships to college and all of that stuff. And but the one thing I never had was my parents never said they were proud of me. Not one single time when I was growing up. And I remember this because the first time I was consciously aware of that, because I just assumed that, no matter what I did, it was never good enough. Right. And so how's that for head trash? Right. And so I remember saying to them, my parents, when I was in my 30s, well, literally after I discovered Affirmations, success, anorexia, and all this stuff. And I realized I was on the phone with them, and I said, you guys never said you were proud of me. Did you never notice that? And they were, of course, they felt bad about it. And I'm sure it wasn't on purpose. They're not bad people. This was just how we were raised. It's like, just do everything and be perfect and shut up and go to the next thing. Which is the exact opposite of everybody today. I woke up. Oh, that's great. I showed up. What's that? The award? What's that award? The participation awards, right?
Yeah, but they don't believe it.
Well, I mean, it's obvious that we went a little too far overboard, right? With that, that's the younger generation, Gen Z or whatever we're on right now. But anyway, the point being is that what I tell people to do, and I tell my clients this, I tell my students this, I tell my audience members this, when we talk about this subject of perfectionism, I say, go to my YouTube channel. It's watchnoahtv.com. Very easy to remember. Watchnoahtv.com. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at watchnoahtv.com. And then when you're on YouTube, you know how you can do the setting of, you can like see which order to see things. You can see the most recent, you can see the most watched. Well, what you do is you go to the oldest ones on my channel on watchnoahtv.com. All right, just go to the oldest ones and watch them and have a good laugh at my expense, because I look so stupid. I look so dorky. I look so nerdy, and I sound terrible. And I go, see, I totally sucked, but I leave those videos on there on purpose, so that people, number one, can have a good laugh at my expense. You're welcome. But number two, say, oh my God, if this guy can do it, I can do it, right? And that's what I want people to realize. It's like, I didn't exactly come out, of the womb going, doing, I mean, I've done, I don't know how many, at least 1,000 podcasts, at least 1,000 videos on my YouTube channel, and on and on and on, writing all these books and all this stuff. But who cares? The point is, I had to start from nothing. Just like everybody, or most people, right? So if I had waited for it to be perfect, we would have 0 videos, 0 books, 0 nothing, right? And so I want people to literally do that. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, watch my early videos and go, okay. Have a good laugh and go, oh my gosh, I just need to get started. See, what's so funny is people aren't willing to go through the sucky phase. When you're especially when we're talking about something like video. This is not a natural thing for most of us. It's very, very rare that a person is just a natural, on camera. Of course it happens, but mostly not, right? And certainly I'm not. I had to learn all this. And I mean, you watch my earlier, my early attempts, and they're pathetic. They're awful. But I keep them there because at least I tried, and at least I kept going through the sucky. Most people aren't willing to suck to get good. They're just like, oh, I have to be perfect. Well, who are you? All right. So use me as an example. Have a good laugh at my expense. Subscribe to the channel and just do it.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, go back one episode to 307, Michelle Molitor. We talk about the whole problem of I am enough. And we dig into that in full because that I am enough is a major cause of head trash in driving it that way. And we've talked about it many times on the podcast. It's just timely coming from the episode right before. Mm-hmm. Let's take a little bit of a left turn. You are a big fan of profit first. How has that helped you in your business?
For years and years and years in my business, I just never paid myself because I didn't feel like I had earned it. Talk about head trash. Right. And so when I came across the profit first, work and book and teachings, I went, why didn't you tell me this before? Because I've been just, killing myself here and not paying myself, really. And, of course, I pay my team and I pay other people, but not me. And how's that for head trash? All right. So, I when I saw that, it really, and when I, learned it, really dug into it and started installing it in my business, it really made a big difference because that was a thing for me. Going back to like what I was just talking about, when my parents never told me they were proud of me, well, it taught me to never be proud of myself, to never acknowledge my own accomplishments. And so I still am very guilty of that. I'm still, the last person to say I did a good job. And the first person to say that I did a lousy job, so I still, like you were talking about earlier, you still have that head trash. It's like in that movie, A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, if you remember that movie. And that was, a great movie, which you can watch anywhere. But in that movie, and I'm not giving anything away for those who haven't seen it, but it was a movie about a guy who saw things that weren't there. Let's just put it that way. And that got him into a lot of trouble because he would listen to things of people that they didn't exist, right? They're just in his imagination. And so by the end of the movie, he had been able to overcome that. But what was so funny is he still saw them, right? They're still over there. And at the very, very end of the movie, again, I'm not giving anything away. He's there with his wife and, he kind of looks over there and he sees those people that aren't there. And, they're just there in his imagination. And his wife says, "What is it, dear?" And he says, nothing at all. Right. And that's to me what head trash is like. It's not like it's not going to be there. I don't think we become, robots or androids or Vulcans, to use lots of Star Trek. But, we're human. And so we're going to hear those voices. You can't do it. You're an idiot. You'll never do anything right. You can't do it right. Blah, 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 whatever it is. But it doesn't have to run you anymore. That's the point. You don't have to be run by the bully in your head. And so, for Profit First, that's one of the things that it helped me with is to acknowledge my own contribution to my own company, which I just absolutely was not doing in terms of money. I wasn't. I mean, I always put myself last. And I thought that I was, being noble or however you want to put it, but it was really wrong. And so I'm very grateful to Profit First and Mike for his work. And, that's why I'm such a big fan.
And it's literally a system that's based on the psychology of business owners, and it leverages their psychology to their advantage instead of to their disadvantage. So
that's right.
That's nice. Just before I forget, you've done a great job today. I just want you to know that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Rob.
You're most welcome. Based on our conversation, what's one action step people can take to move forward this week?
Going back to what I said earlier, step number one is write down your pot of gold. What is your pot of gold? What's your NDR, your new desired reality? Where do you want to go? Number two, write down where you are right now. What's your CPR, your current perceived reality? Write down where you want to be. Number one. Number two, where you are right now. And number three, what is the head trash that is holding you back right now? What is it specifically for you? And by the way, you talked about a moment ago about, I'm enough. My very first newsletter 25 years ago was called You Are Enough. So I've been teaching this for over 20 plus years, that very thing, you are enough. So, you're absolutely right. That is huge for millions of us, So where do you want to be? Where are you right now? What's in your way? And then number 4, ask yourself a very simple question. How much is it going to cost me if I don't take out my head trash this year? Literally, how much is it going to cost me if I don't take out my head trash this year? Because the longer you wait to take out your head trash, the more money, opportunity, wealth will slip through your fingers. In fact, just to give you a quick example of that, I asked one of my clients that exact question, and we were talking and I said, how much do you think your head trash is going to cost you this year without batting an eye? He said $1 million. He said, it's going to cost me $1 million if I don't get it out. I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you give me just 10% of that $1 million? And I will get you that $1 million. In other words, if you give me $1 and I give you $10 back, is that a good deal? He said, yeah. So he paid me $100,000 to coach him. Well, we've already more than doubled his money in less than 12 weeks of working together. Okay, so that's just one simple, quick example. All right, so the point is that if you don't take out your head trash, it will cost you. I've never had anybody say to me it's going to cost them less than $10,000 a month. Some people say $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 a month. A month. Right. And by the way, this never ends. It's not like it's going to stop. So that's $1 million a year. So whatever you need to do, whether it's hire me, read my books, go to my online courses, come to one of our events, whatever it is, do something to take out your head trash as fast as possible. Otherwise, you're going to keep paying that cost and it will never stop.
It won't stop. Literally, if you can understand these 3 words, everything will be fine. I am enough. And that's it. That's literally the secret to everything. Mm-hmm. So hard to do. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Using my own system, which sounds funny, but number 1, using Afformations, affirming every day, and really just following my system. So realizing that life is about those 4 elements that I talked about: time, energy, relationships, and money, and really focusing on all 4 of those, as best I can each day.
And we talk about that all the time. We've got about 7 different areas that we focus on. One of them being mindset, which is, again, what you're talking about. We talk about the same 4 that you talk about. We add a little bit of spirituality to that and making sure we're healthy every single day.
Yes.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Don't pay those friggin' gurus. Jesus. Was that a big mistake to the tune of $500,000? They truly, truly cannot teach their way out of a paper bag. They're great marketers, great persuaders, great salesmen, but they truly suck at teaching. They just they really don't have a method. They have a personality, which is, why they're there. But there's no there. So boy, I wish I would have learned that one earlier.
It's the lessons that we have to learn and the prices we have to pay. I know I've spent a lot of money on self-development myself.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would definitely teach them about Affirmations because it is so powerful. By the way, for everyone listening, definitely teach your kids Affirmations. I mean, we're talking kids love Affirmations, even like 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. They love it. They get better grades, better self-esteem. But certainly from, if it were me, my own 18-year-old self or an 18-year-old, I would definitely teach them to affirm because that's your brain. That is literally how you are going to go through life. And what's so funny about my Affirmations method is you're already doing it anyway. Every human on this planet is already using my Affirmations method. There's only 2 problems. Number 1, of course, they don't know they're doing it. Number 2, most people, by far the majority of people, are using disempowering questions instead of empowering. So using that, I think, could really and would really make an enormous difference for anyone.
Enormous. And at 18, you have the power to compound. If people would like to learn more about you, your programs, your books, and everything else, where do they do that?
Well, the main website is my name, noahstjohn.com, just like it sounds, NOAHSTJOHN.com, noahstjohn.com. We have lots of free gifts for your listeners. You can go to freegiftfromnoah.com and get a free training on how I help my clients make more in 12 weeks than they made in the last 12 months while winning their life back. That's freegiftfromnoah.com. And also, if you want to get my head trash book for free, that's sendmeabooknoah.com. Send me a book, Noah.com. The book is free. We just ask you to cover the shipping. So all of that, you can just go to the main hub, noahstjohn.com. Make sure you get on our newsletter. We have lots of free resources, as I mentioned. But, and by the way, if you want to book me to speak at your event, just go to booknoah.com. What else? Book Noah. Who should we book? Booknoah.com.
I'm going to have to get more websites. The only other one I have is listentoRocky.com.
I have 300, so I won't give you all of them. So yeah, it's a lot.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I will be the first to admit it. I've suffered a lot of head trash throughout my life, and I keep working on it. Little by little, we make progress. It comes down to the questions we ask ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. That's what this week's action step was all about. Write down your pot of gold. Where do you want to go? Where are you today? And what's the head trash that's holding you back? The real question is, how much is it going to cost if we don't do it? What are we giving up? I can tell you, when you look at how that multiplies and compounds, it is enormous. When I look back at the choices I've made through my life, I realize I have left millions on the table that I could have done better. You did hear Dr. Noah St. John talk about Profit First and how it has helped him. If you're a business owner, check out the Profit Answer Man podcast. That's where we focus on that. Next week, we've got the health detective on, Susan Birch, to teach us how to be even healthier by making small changes in the way that we eat, in the supplements, and the other things that we look at. By the way, do you know someone who could be helped by listening to this episode? Would you do me a favor and share it with them? I'd appreciate that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.